Welcome. Today we will be discussing how to add and subtract fractions. Now, adding and subtracting fractions is very particular in that it's not like multiplying or dividing where we can just work straight across. When we talk about adding and subtracting fractions, we need to be familiar with the numerator and denominator. So with a fraction, the top term is what we would call our numerator. The term on the bottom is known as our denominator. If I have two fractions, say 3 over 4 plus 1 over 3, in order to add these fractions, we need to have what's called a common denominator. Okay, so we need the common denominator. We need them to have the same denominator in order to add these fractions. But we can't just change the number. We have to maintain the proportion of the fraction. So, for example, this fraction here is 3/4. So if I want to change this fraction, I need to maintain the proportion and change both the top and the bottom so that the fraction is equivalent to 3/4. Same thing with this fraction over here. If I change it, it needs to maintain the proportion of being equal to 1/3 if simplified. So how can we do that? Well, there's a couple different ways we can go about thinking about finding the common denominator. One way we can is multiply our denominators 4 times 3 to see what they go into. That would tell me, okay, both of those values go into 12. Now, this will always work, but it's not always going to necessarily give us the least common denominator. We usually want to use the least common denominator if possible. So what we typically want to say is, what is the lowest possible term that both 4 and 3 go into? For example, what are the multiples of 4? Well, there's 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and so on. What are the multiples of 3? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and so on. And if we look at these multiples of these terms, they both share one multiple of 12. They both go into 12. So I have to say, okay, what do I have to multiply this side by to get my 4 equal to 12? I would have to multiply it by 3. But I'm not multiplying just the denominator by 4, I'm not multiplying just the denominator by 3. I'm also multiplying the numerator by 3 as well. I'm maintaining the proportion of the fraction. In doing so, that's going to give me 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 times 4 is 12. And if I simplified that fraction, it would equal to 3/4. Now on the right side here, I want to have a denominator of 12 as well, so I'm going to be multiplying both sides by, well, 3 times what gives me 12? 3 times 4. So I need to multiply both the numerator by 4 and the denominator by 4. If I do that, 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 3 is 12. I can now add these terms together because they share the same denominator. Add the numerators together, 9 plus 4 gives me 13. And we don't combine the denominators. They stay the same. It's going to stay 12. So our solution would be 13 over 12. We always want to simplify if we can, but this can't be simplified. The most we can do is write it as an improper fraction, which would be 1 and 1/12 if we wanted to do that. And that is how we add fractions. Now, subtracting follows the same methods. If I want to subtract a fraction, we still need a common denominator. We are going to follow the same processes. So if I have fractions such as 1 over 5 minus 2 over 6, well, I want to find a common denominator that they both go into. But there's one thing we can denote first. We can actually simplify this fraction on the right here. We can simplify it to 1/3 because 2 goes into both of these values. 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. And so I end up with 1/5 minus 1/3. Now I can find my common denominator between 5 and 3. What is the lowest possible term that 3 and 5 both go into? Well, that would be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. The multiples of 5 would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, so on. Notice that they both go into 15. Again, we could have just multiplied 3 times 5 to get 15 on the denominator to find, okay, the common denominator is 15. That will work. So then we say, okay, our common denominator is 15, so I have to say, what do I have to multiply 5 by to equal to 15? Well, that would have to be multiplied by 3. Multiply both the numerator and denominator, that would give me 3 over 15. And then I'm subtracting from that 1/3. Well, how do I get to 15 from 1/3? I would have to multiply both sides by 5. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 3 is 15. I now subtract. 3 minus 5 would give me a negative 2, and we leave the 15 as is. We end up with negative 2 over 15. Simplify if we can, which we can't, and so we have our final solution of negative 2 over 15. And that is how we subtract fractions.